Adrian Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise to give my final speech in the House. I would stress that notwithstanding the comments about the difficulties of the politics and the role of Parliament at this moment, my reasons are essentially personal. I've been here for 19 years. It doesn't seem a minute since I gave my maiden speech. My enthusiasm for politics is undiminished, and my commitments to the values that have always driven my political activity are still there. However, my birth certificate and the fact that last year I had to have a second hip replacement is a timely reminder that you cannot always take for granted that you'll have time available to do everything else that you want to do in life, that unfortunately being here precludes you from doing so. So I have made that decision to move on. Now, before I talk about more general issues, I would like other members here to express a few thanks. First of all, I'd like to thank my constituency of West Bromwich West and the electors for re-electing me 6 times. I am a very strong pro-Europe Remainer. My constituency voted 70% Brexit, but their undiminished support for me, I think, is both a reflection of the broadness of the views that they do have on many ways, and perhaps a salutary warning to the current Prime Minister who, on his election strategy as well. I will also comment that I've been privileged to represent a genuinely multicultural constituency, heavily industrialised, and behind those often very prepossessing facades, there are small businesses which are at the cutting edge of our manufacturing technology and drive the revival in our civil aviation and our motor industry that has made us the pride of the word and committed and contributed a huge amount to our economy. I'd like to thank my family, my wife Jill, for her unstinting support, which, as the Honourable Member for Derbyshire Dales said, is always there in public, often in private is slightly more critical, but has always been valuable. My stepson Danny, who always found me a complete embarrassment when he was a teenager, and now is a trade union organiser and a councillor to boot. I would like also to thank my party for backing me all these years, and the Cooperative Party for their backing as well. I had a long spell as a Cooperative Party organiser. I've always been strongly committed to cooperative and mutual values. I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity that they gave me to work for them and the backing that they've given me here. In addition, and not finally, I'd like to thank Councillors Lorraine Ashman and Maria Crompton, who have been my assistants in West Bromwich for 19 and 18 years respectively. They are brilliant, their expertise is fantastic, and I know that they personally, for the work that they've done for me, have changed the lives of many people and individual electors in the constituency, and I would like that recognised. I said that my birth certificate told me it was time to go. It caused me to look back, and I realised that altogether I have contested 10 parliamentary elections, 1 Euro, and 5 local government elections. I first worked in the 1964 election as a student Labour activist. I remember heckling Sir Alec Douglas Hume, Peter Walker, father of the current member for Worcester. I keep reminding him of that. And of course, Jeremy Thorpe, and I'll come onto that in a moment. I first contested a parliamentary election when I was just 24 in South Worcester against a certain character that older members may remember, Sir Gerald Nabarro. I then went on and contested Nantwich a couple of times in the 74 elections, and then the Wirral by-election, and that brings me on to what I think is possibly a unique niche I have in political history, I have contested 2 by-elections nearly 25 years apart, and both on the retirement of the speakers. It was Selwyn Lloyd in 1976 and, of course, Betty Boothroyd in West Bromwich West in 2000. I have to say I remember the West Bromwich one a lot more fondly than the Wirral one. 76 was not a good year for Labour, and I do remember that it was even worse actually for the Lib Dems, because it was the height of Jeremy Thorpe's problems, and I remember exchanging pleasantries with him over a loudspeaker during the course of the campaign when he came to speak for the Liberal candidate. I think I halved the Liberal vote and I doubled the Tory vote. A week later, Harold Wilson resigned. I've always felt a bit guilty because I felt that I was perhaps personally responsible for it. I did think when I first contested an election when I was 24 years old, I would get into Parliament as a fairly young man, but unfortunately I ran into a couple of problems. The first is that I have always been fundamentally committed to Europe, and at that time, in the late 70s and early 80s, the Labour Party was fundamentally opposed to it. Yeah. I was always a multilateralist at a time when the Labour Party was committed to unilateralism, and I realised that my parliamentary prospects were evaporating in front of me. However, I then was lucky to be employed by the Cooperative Party, and as a movement this gave me the opportunity to continue in politics, albeit in another capacity, be my own person, promote my own values and ideals, and notwithstanding that I couldn't do it in Parliament. I do remember one interesting occasion when I was rung up in 1981. It was the big deputy leaders debate between Ben Healy and Silkin. Yeah. I was asked to go to Liverpool Waventree to speak on behalf of Dennis Healy. Now, in common parlance, in political terms, that's a bit of a hospital. But it was dominated by Derek Hatton and the militant tendency. And I was debating against a representative for Tony Benn and also a certain person by the name of Doug Hoyle, father of the current speaker. I do remember that my powers of oratory and persuasion enabled me to get exactly no votes. In that particular, there were 12 abstentions, but I'm running out of time, so I will just move on and just make a couple of observations quickly. It has been an immense privilege to work here. I've seen how Parliament has become more powerful vis-à-vis the government. As chair of the Select Committee, BIS Select Committee for 5 years, it was one of the most rewarding things I've done, and I want to see the powers of Select Committee enhanced, because not only does it hold the government to account, but it gives government the insight into just how its policies are playing out on the ground, shall we say, without the translation that comes from the layers of civil servants that like to advise their ministers. I think they're a tremendous enhancement, a really valuable part of this Parliament. I would just say thank you to everybody. Despite the sharp and confrontational exchanges that take place, there is an underlying comradeship and community feeling of those here that I've always found very valuable. I wish my successor and everybody who comes after me all the best in the very difficult decision they're going to have to make, and I will still be out there campaigning to promote the values I've always done. Thank you, everybody.